in France, are The Question of Lucifer, a record of things seen and heard in the secret societies according to the evidence of initiates. Chapter 6, Art Sacerdotal. Some few months after the first testimonies to Palladism appeared under the signatures of the witnesses whom we have already examined, a fresh contribution was made to the literature of diabolism in its connection with Masonry by a work entitled Freemasonry, the Synagogue of Satan. The exalted ecclesiastical position of the author magistrate? Is that what MGR means? Leon Murin, S.J., Archbishop of Port Louis, Emartius, gave new impetus and an aspect of increased importance to accusations preferred at the beginning, as we have seen, by contemporarily obscure or directly suspected writers. The performance, moreover, was apparently so learned, in some respects so unlooked for, and withal so methodical, that it became subsequently a source of universal reference in anti-Mason literature. To this day, M. Huysmans remains dazzled, and to those in search of reliable information on the subject he says, "If you would be saved from the excesses of unseated reason and from narratives of Dunciad dullness, try Magistrate Murin. Read the Archbishop on Palladism. Within certain limits, the advice is well grounded. The art sacerdotal and its application to anti-Masonry may leave much to be desired, but as a specimen of the superior criticism obtaining upon this subject in higher circles, it offers a strong contrast to the general tone and touch among the rank and file of the accusers. We are, in fact, warranted upon every consideration, and expecting a valuable contribution to our knowledge. But I may say at once that this expectation is unfortunately not realized. With a keen philosophical anticipation, one turns the pages of Freemasonry, the Synagogue of Satan, admires their beautiful topography, lingers with delight over the elaborate appendix of allegorical engravings, and experiences a brief sense of intellectual inferiority in the presence of such formidable sections, and so portentous a table of contents. It should be impossible to speak of the Archbishop without a mental genuflection, but it remains true that our expectation is not realized. It will become us at the same time to speak as tenderly as possible of a pious and learned prelate who has now passed, where Masons cease from satanizing, and the 33 degrees are at rest. But it must be said plainly that the contents of this very large volume offer little to our purpose. By the nature of his episcopal charge, Magistrate Murin, if MGR stands for something else that I'm not thinking of, I'll just say magistrate. Magistrate Murin had special faculties for ascertaining how many men diabolize The island of Mauritius has enjoined many privileges of Infernus. We lose sight of the Rosicrucians on the road to India. There the Comte de Chazal initiated Dr. Backstrom. And all this, of course, is diabolical from the standpoint of anti-Masonry. Moreover, it must not be forgotten that Magistrate Morin, in a series of wonderful conferences, has exhibited the superstitions of Mauritius, and accepting the test of M. Huysmans, the existence of black magic in this French colony is proved to hilt and handle by wholesale Eucharistic depredations, the sacrifice of cats at midnight upon the altars of rifled churches, and the discovery of the blood of victims in the chalices used for the elements. The Church does not stir in the matter. It deplores and prays, which seems, in some respects, an ineffectual method of protecting the Latins' ditus. If the Eucharist be liable to profanation, why reserve the Eucharist? Surely the negligence which makes such profanations possible is the offer of opportunity to deicide, and great carelessness is the cousin to condonation. However this may be, Magister Morin seems to have been quite the authority to whom would naturally refer for specific information upon devil worship as it obtains within his own diocese, even if apart from Masonry. But he is too erudite to concern himself with individual facts, and he, so far as transcends diocesan limitations, as to forget Mauritius completely. Another witness, who perhaps never visited Port Louis, affirms that the central directory of the Palladium for Africa is established in that place, but the prelate, those blue things in the Goetia, they're demonic prelates, but this is a different type of prelate, of Port Louis, from whom the information would have been precious, seems acquainted with nothing of the kind. The weapon of this meteored warrior is at the same time a sufficiently portentous thesis as follows: that Freemasonry is connected with Satanism by the fact that it has the Jews for its true authors, and the Jewish Kabbalah for the key of its mysteries. Well, that the Kabbalah is magical, idolatrous, and essentially diabolical, that Freemasonry, considered as a religion, is therefore a Judaized devil worship, and considered as a political institution, and its engine destined for the attainment of universal empire, which has been the dream of the Jews for centuries. Now, there's many types of Judaism. Yes, there are diabolical forms of Judaism, you can say, but Kabbalah, what do you think the conservative Christians do when they don't interpret things literally and they have different layers and meanings and all that sort of stuff? But let's take a moment to reflect here. Who are the prelates of the Goetia? We have Vasagu, Sitri, Epos. At the end is Seir, Ga'ap, I don't remember what else. There's not too many of them. but we're talking about human prelates here. Um, well, there's legions. That's the thing you would understand about this. But just being different is not the same thing as diabolism. The transubstantiation, isn't that what a lot of magic is about? Is that something becomes a spiritual substance, whether it's yourself or whatever, through your rituals. It doesn't mean that God literally comes down into the bread and drink that you or whatever you're going to say. My readers will be inclined to consider that such a hypothesis, though it may square with the Satanism of Adriano Lemmi, who, as we shall see, is accused of circumcision, can hardly be brought into harmony with the universal masonry of Albert Pike, as the latter was neither Jewish nor Judaizer. Of course, we know that the Israelites didn't start out circumcising; they picked it up from the Canaanites and the Egyptians. They kind of abandoned it for a while in the historical way of thinking, and then over a couple hundred years after the so-called after the Exodus, which you could say so-called because it wasn't entirely what people think. It wasn't the numbers. But anyways, but common hatred of the Catholic Church is, in the opinion of Magister Marin, a sufficient bond to identify the interests of both parties. Let us start, therefore, with the Archbishop's own hypothesis, which he compresses into a single sentence: to encircle the brow of the Jew with the royal diadem, and to place the kingdom of the world at his feet. Such is the true end of Freemasonry. And again, the Jewish Kabbalah is the Hebrew form. Kabbalah implies some of the idolatrous sort of, the polytheistic sort of things. If you say Kabbalah, you may not mean any of that. And you definitely don't mean the Christian, you add Sheen into the middle of Yahweh, and it's not really, Yeshua is not Jesus. But anyways. And again, the Jewish Kabbalah is the philosophical basis and key of Freemasonry. Once more, the end of Freemasonry is universal dominion, and Freemasonry is a Jewish institution. It definitely contains elements from Judaism, but let's limit our understanding. Let's limit our take on that. Accepting these statements as points that admit of being argued with difference to the rules of right reason, let us establish in turn two positions which do not admit of being argued because they are evident in themselves. Where the significance of symbols is uncertain, and it is easy to interpret falsely. When a subject is obscure and difficult, no person is qualified to speak positively if his knowledge be obtained at second hand. Now we have good reason to suppose that Magistrate Marin is possessed of first-hand knowledge, and is consequently in a position to interpret truly upon the difficult subject he has undertaken, namely the esoteric doctrines of the Kabbalah. If not, we are entitled to dismiss him without further examination. And as I've hinted at before, particularly looking at the historical dates of the origins of the actual Kabbalah material and the occurrence of certain patterns and such things in the Quran and the sayings of Muhammad ibn Abdullah, before you find them in Jewish literature, I am saying that the Kabbalah came from the Sufis. There was Jewish mysticism even before historical Judaism. Even if you take it back to 540 amongst the Israelites, there were surely mystical interpretations and practices that weren't completely of everybody, but there were certain things that you didn't really see explicitly mentioned until after the Sufis interacted with Jewish populations, and there was a lot of tolerance in the north, west, and southern, and the southwest portions of Europe under Islamic rule and clear over to Syria. But if not, we are entitled to dismiss him without further examination. As a fact in this preliminary and essential matter, the Archbishop can stand no test. The antiquity of Kabbalah is necessary to work his hypothesis, and he assumes it as if unaware that its antiquity had ever been impugned. There may be such to be said upon both sides of this hotly debated question, but there is nothing to be said for a writer who seems ignorant that there is a question, and hence my readers will in no way be astonished to learn that his information is obtained at second hand, or that his one authority is Frank. With a K, okay. CK. But this fact is the key to his entire work, and the sole credit that is due to him is the skillful appearance of erudition which he has given to a shallow performance, and the natural mental elegance which has prevented him from being nosy and violent. Our inquiry into modern devil worship does not warrant us in discussing the positions of writers who choose to assume that the Kabbalah, Gnosticism, and other systems are a priori diabolical, because assumptions of this kind are unreasonable. There are writers at this moment in France who argue. My stomach keeps growling at the word France for some reason. Who argue that the English word God is the equivalent of Lucifer, but one does not dispute with these. Joseph Campbell and his. What do you mean by. You keep using this word. I want to know what you mean by it. What's the word? God. You don't know what God means? Well, I don't know what you mean by it. And it's like, yeah, people can mean God, anything. We're not having a singular or definitive like some Semitic terms like Allah and Allah. Allah. Well, Allah. Yeah, the A at the end, and you have the in the Aramea. But Allah is a singular and definitive, so people know what you're talking about. You're either talking about God or Godhead. For the satisfaction, but one does not dispute with these. For the satisfaction of my readers, it may be, however, be well to state that the voluminous treatise of Magistrate Marin has come into existence because he has discovered, as one might say, accidentally, that the number 33, which is that of the degrees in French masonry, is the number of the divinities in the Vedas, and thus creating a presumption that the mysteries of Freemasonry connect with those of antiquity. Climb the spine. Climb the spine. 32 teeth. Different things here. Of course, they connect with antiquity, for the simple reason that there is solidarity between all symbolisms, and moreover, it is perfectly clear that Masonry has either inherited from the past by a perpetuated tradition or is borrowed therefrom. Magistrate Marin had therefore as little reason to be astonished at the correctness of his presumption when he came to work it out as had to be delighted with the inference which prevails throughout his inquiry, namely, that the mysteries of pagan antiquity were delusions of the devil, and the modern mysteries which connect with those are diabolical delusions. Oh, yeah, and the Bible says, these cleverly imagined stories full of meaning, they're really true this time incarnate in our Lord Jesus Christ. Wait, what? You know that they've been said for a long time, and it turns out Easter was celebrated for 4,200 years before the Christians picked up Easter, even with the 40-day Lent, and and pagan and heathen aren't really religious categories. They were terms used for monotheist until 1967 by the Catholic Church. druid is people who live among trees, specifically white people who live among trees. I mean, well, oak trees. Druid is oak, but there's a lot of these things. Indeed, he is so continually making discoveries which are fresh to himself and to no one acquainted with the subject, that one would be pleasantly diverted by his simplicity if it were not for the bad faith which underlies his assumptions. For example, every one who knows anything of Goetic literature is aware that the rituals of black magic incorporate heterogeneous elements from Kabbalistic sources, but to Magistrate Marin, this fact comes with the force of a surprise. Well, certainly they're named after. You have all these things named after prophets and stuff, and to kind of, oh well, no, it's not a demonic thing. It's as good Christians, we're doing this as good Christians, but let's see behind the blinders and strip the Christian stuff off the Goetia, like I did with like the Goetia playlist, and I'll do a Grimorium Verum, I'll do more on that one. Um, Honestly, expect me to take years studying and practicing in that regard before you have everything worked out that I'm going to work out. Well, at least enough to put together a book, right? Um, his Masonic erudition is about as great and as little as his proficiency in Kabbalah. He quotes Carlyle as an authority, applies the term orthodox to French Freemasonry exclusively, whereas the developments of the fraternity in France have always had an heterodox complexion, while his tripartite classification of the 33 degrees of that rite of the ancient accepted Scottish rite is made an arbitrary matter to suit a preconceived theory, and entirely effaces the importance inherent in the first three grades, which are themselves the sum of Masonry. Moreover, the classification in question is presented as a most secret instruction imparted in some fastness of Masonry outside the 33 degrees, but no authority is named. And remember, in America, you had Scottish and Irish coming to particular areas. That's why in the Carolinas and Georgia, you have all this, the devil's right outside, so that's the devil's fork, and that's the devil's this. And, there's a particular site I plan to visit that actually is a meteor strike. But, so obviously you're going to have a Scottish sort of version kind of appear in this area. Is it Charlotte, North Carolina? Is that the Charlotte they were talking about? Or is it South? Such being the qualifications and such are the methods of the Archbishop, I do not propose to accompany him through the long course of his interpretations, but will supply instead, for the economy of labor on the part of those who may wish to follow in his footsteps, a skeleton past. I said Scottish, Irish, right? A skeleton plan, a procedure by which they will be able to prove learnedly anything they please in Freemasonry. It is well known that the fraternity makes use of mystic numbers and other symbols. Take, therefore, any mystic number or combination of numbers as an example. 3 times 3 equals 9. You'll probably be unacquainted with the meaning which attaches to the figure of the product, but it will occur to you that the 9 of spades is regarded as the disappointment in cartomancy. 9 of swords, cruelty. 10 of swords, oppression. Begin, therefore, by confidently expecting something bad. Reflect upon the fact that cards have been occasionally denominated by the devil's books. Conclude thence that Freemasonry is the devil's institution. Well, the tarot actually descends from church paintings, and it descends before that from themes that do occur in the ancient Egyptian. And there was a book published in the 70s, and I never remember the name of it, but I saw it, and it went through how the ancient Egyptians actually did have the themes of the tarot and gave examples of the 78 cards. Conclude thence that Freemasonry is the devil's institution. Do not be misled by the objection that there is no traceable connection between cards and Masonry. Anticipate an occult connection or secret liaison. The term last used has probably occurred to you by the will of God. Do not forget that it describes a questionable sexual relationship. Be sure, therefore, that Freemasonry is a veil of the worst species of moral license. You have now reached an important stage in the unmasking of Masonry, and you can sum it up as follows: Freemasonry is the cultus of the phallus. If you know anything of ecclesiastical Latin, the words noctium phantasmata may perhaps occur to you, and the whole field of demonology to connect with the fraternity will open before you. But if you would confine yourself to the region of lubricity, recollect that our first parents went naked till the serpent tempted them, and they wore aprons. Now there is a variation of the myth where they naturally wore clothes and they got distracted by the serpent and were naked. And wait a second, we're naked. We should probably cover that. Then I feel like I should cover that. But you know, phallic being solar, you know, and the yoni being lunar and negative. But see, when you make it all negative, you demonize the female. It's like life is a balance. That they wore aprons. Hence the apron, which is a Masonic emblem, has from time immemorial been the covering of shame. Now, the private part is calling them shame. That's one of the problems in the Bible. The Quran doesn't use that term. It doesn't refer to it as shame. The aura, you don't have besht, and I don't remember the Arabic, but besht is the Aramea. But you don't have the word of shame. You don't have the term dirty or, najis being attached to sex if it's done right, Should it occur to you, other than the fact my stomach's growling and saying, you haven't fed me today, well, I like to fast on Mondays, thank you very much. Read a Genesis, that God made the aprons, dismiss it as a temptation of the devil, who would, if possible, prevent you from unveiling him. By this time, it would be well to recur to the number 9, as your chain of reasoning has been established, possessing an honorable significance. Eye, nose, ear, nose, mouth, genitals, anus. We're a city of 9 gates. Now take the numbers follow it through the history of religions by means of some theological reckoner, as a cheap dictionary by Magnet. You will be sure to find something to your purpose, i.e., something significantly bad. When I do the number symbolism, I have to say something bad, because they're saying, "Oh, all good angels. It's the angels sending me messages." So you got to answer something crazy in there. You got to answer something negative. I'm just saying stuff that actually applies to those numbers. So showing that number symbolism and oracles aren't good or bad in themselves. It's how you use and interpret them. It's your choice. Take responsibility for yourself. But place a significance against the use of that number in Masonry. Repeat this process, picking anything serviceable by the way, and continue so until doing your volume has attained its required dimensions. You will never want for materials, and this is how Masonry is unveiled. Well, personal interpretation and experience, but let's not be... there is no exaggeration in this sketch. Manager Marin is indeed by far more fatuous. On the 26th of May, 1876, the Supreme Council of Sovereign Grand Inspector General of the 33rd degree of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite are said to have issued a circular dated from 33 Golden Square, London. Will my readers believe their own eyes or my sincerity when I say that the most illustrious of the French anti-Masonic interpreters, member the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, and Archbishop of Port Louis, solemnly enjoins us to remark that number 33 and the square of gold, which signify the supreme place in the world, signified to the liberty of gold, by thus commenting on a significant number attached to a real address, situated, as everyone knows, in the most central district of the city. Archbishop Marin believes that he is not descending from pleasant comedy into screaming farce of interpretation, but that he is acting seriously and judiciously, has a right to look wise, and to believe that he has hit hard. No person who is acquainted with the Kabbalah even in its historical aspects, much less the ripe scholar M.A. Frank, from whom the materials are derived, will tolerate for a moment that the theory that this mystical literature of the Jewish nation is capable of a diabolical interpretation. In particular, it lends itself to the crude Manichaean system attributed to Albert Pike about as much and as little as it does atheistic materialism. The reading of Magistrate Marin may be compared with that of Mirandola, who discovered not dualism, but the Christian mystery of the Trinity contained indubitably therein, who regarded it with more reason than the bridge by which the Jew might ultimately pass over to Christ, who infected a pontiff with his enthusiasm, and it will be seen that the Catholic archbishop looks ridiculous in his lustre of his derived erudition. To insist further on this point, it is, however, scarcely to our purpose. The Kabbalah does not possess that integral connection with Masonry which is argued by Magistrate Marin. And if it did, it does not bear the interpretation which he assigns it, while his anti-Semitic thesis, while anti-Jewish, not the same as anti-Semitic. The Semitic people are brown-skinned, black woolly-haired, and tend to be shorter than what you expect of white Jews, but definitely anti-Jewish thesis, demolished with his other hypothesis. But these things are largely outside the question which concerns us most directly. Over and above these points, does the witness whom we are examining contribute anything to our knowledge on the subject of the new and reformed Palladium, otherwise universal Masonry? The reply is perfectly clear. He is one source of knowledge. His one source of knowledge is Adolf Recul. By some oversight, he is not even at the advantage of the rituals published by Leo Taxil. He may therefore be dismissed out of hand. The Satanism which he exhibits in Masonry is an imputed Satanism, and as to any actual devil worship, he reproduces as true the clever story of Aut Diabolus, Aut Nihil, which appeared originally in Blackwood's magazine, and has since been reprinted by its author, who states, for people know already, that it's entirely fictitious. In parting with the writer of Freemasonry, the Synagogue of Satan, as a witness whose evidence has broken down, it must be repeated that he has, by his exalted position, elegance of method, and show of learning, been a chief pillar of the satanic hypothesis. And let us remember that every path, every person, every nation, whatever, has good and truth of them. A lot of these things are to encourage people from whatever. It's not just, oh, we must bring them to Jesus worship. But Jesus, if we look at the Bible, look at the Bible, read the Bible yourself, and you'll figure out that maybe some of these things said about Jesus aren't literal. Some of these things said by him are different than Christianity.